Welcome everyone to the next portion of the CoreView Finance training videos. In this video, what we are going to be covering is checks. That's going to include three main topics here. The first topic is going to be how do we create a check out of the system. The second is going to be how do we print those checks out of the system. And then lastly, how do we search and look for checks that have already been printed. So going back to the first topic, there are three ways of generating a check out of the system. The first way is going to be through a refund, which I will show in this video. The second way is going to be through restitution. We do have a video for restitution, so I would recommend watching that video to see how we go about creating a check based off restitution. And then lastly is going to be the end of month, that end of month check that the system automatically generates once it has been processed. We do have a video for the end of month as well, so I'd recommend watching that one as well to get an understanding of how the end of month check is generated out of the system. So let's go ahead and dive into the first one of that refund way of generating a check out of the system. So notice how I don't say print check, I said generate check first, because the system generates a check detail prior to actually printing out the check on a physical check or on paper. So what I've done in the system so far is I've created a test case, and we are going to go ahead and go through the beginning of how to add money to a case and then how to pull that money and refund it to the defendant or whoever it needs to go, a payee. So the first thing that we're going to go ahead and do is at the top left-hand corner, we're going to go up to modules and we're going to go to case management. We're essentially searching for our case here. So we're going to go up to functions, case initiation, and in the case number field, I'm going to go ahead and paste in my case number and hit search. There's our case. And what we're going to go ahead and do is I'm going to go ahead and open it, and I'm going to show you guys the cost screen. I want to show you guys what it looks like before we start adding any type of cost docket or refund docket. So let's go ahead and open this up and go to costs. So up top here, you see the docket application. Okay. That's going to be all your normal cost dockets that go into some type of a disbursement account. In the cost dockets video, we did discuss how there are accounts tied to every cost docket. And so those accounts are disbursement accounts. At the end of the month, whenever the court does their end of month process, the system will pull the money sitting in those disbursement accounts and include them in one big end of month check, which then gets sent to the controller's office or treasurer or wherever that's supposed to go. A holding application docket is going to be the same thing as those other ones. It's still considered a cost docket, but instead of having a disbursement account tied to that docket, it's actually an account that is a holding account. The main difference is that a disbursement account at the end of the month, the money gets pulled automatically when the end of month process is complete. The holding dockets, that money will sit in that holding account until the user does some type of manual process to move that money. That can be in the form of applying that money sitting in the holding account and applying it to other cost dockets, or simply refunding the money to a payee. So that's going to be the difference up here. We're not going to see any changes up top here in this example, but what we are going to see is that once we start throwing those cost dockets that have the holding accounts tied to them, they're going to be listed down here. Also, we're going to be seeing this holding account. Once we start receipting to those cost dockets with the holding accounts tied, we're going to start seeing some fields get populated down here. So without further ado, let's go ahead and start looking at that. So we're going to go ahead and close out of this screen, and we're just going to head over to dockets. So we hit close, and then we went over to dialog link number 3, docket entries. It's going to tell us that no records found for search criteria. That's right, because we don't have any dockets on the case yet. So again, like a normal cost, in order for us to put some money into that holding account, we have to throw a cost docket. A situation where something like this would happen would be when an individual is arrested and they're processed, and they will then make bail. They will pay the $500 bail to get out of jail. So we have to record that cash bail that that person had posted in the case management system as well. So we're going to go up and add our first cost docket to start recording their cash bail. We're going to go ahead and do the first dialog link, which is add record. There are other dockets in the system that are tied to holding accounts. Some of those, an example would be the cash bail. Another one would be an overpayment, where an individual sends in a check to pay off fines and fees. They pay a little bit over, and the court will record that overage in the form of an overpayment docket and then refund that money to back to the individual who had paid. So here we have our docket entry. So I know the code for our cash bail docket. It's actually cash bail posted, so it's CBP. That's pretty universal for most courts, but you could always double check with your court admin or any of those in the court as well. I'm gonna go ahead and put CBP and then tab off, cash bail posted. Awesome. Now to the right of that, what we wanna go ahead and do is we want to add some type of amount. Again, these are zero cost dockets, so you will need to add in some amount before you can save it. We're gonna go ahead and say that this individual had paid $500 cash bail to make bail. So we're all set there. All that needs to be done is to add your docket code, put in the amount, and if you'd like, go ahead and put in some comments below in the description text box. I'm gonna go ahead and leave this all as is, and I'm gonna hit save. All right, now it's saying that we have $500 amount due for this cash bail posted docket. So individual was arrested, went in jail, he made bail. Now we have to record that in the system, and we recorded that cash bail in the form of a cost docket. So let's go ahead and hit close on this docket entry screen, and I'm gonna go back over to the 6 Dynalink costs. Here now we're gonna see that there's a cash bail deposit docket that has been populated in the holding application. Again, the money that is sitting in the holding application is going into an account that is a holding account. Again, that money sits there until the users move that money manually. And typically that's applying it to fines and fees or using that money just to refund to the defendant or payee. Okay, so now we have that. We have 500 that's owed, 0 that's been paid, dismissed is 0, and we have 500 that's now due. So what we're gonna go ahead and do at this point is we are going to receipt to that docket. Bear in mind that down here, we still don't see any type of fields being populated, but once we receipt that money, we definitely will start seeing that. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm gonna go ahead and hit close one time. I'm gonna close one more time and highlight the case just in case, and then the second Dynalink print receipts. All right, I'm just gonna go ahead and say that that is a cash payment. And I'm gonna go ahead and hit save. I'm gonna keep the rest of it static. I'm not gonna put a comment down here. I'm gonna say that's good, save. I'm not gonna print out any of the receipts. I'm just gonna hit cancel on those. And we're gonna go ahead and go back to opening the case and go back to costs. Now below here, you're gonna see that some of the fields are populated. The holding account is shared with the entire court in all cases, but this cost screen is only gonna show what that case specifically has sitting in the holding account. So it's gonna give you the holding account number. It's gonna be, for this one, it's 1A for the test court identifier, and then bail holding. Yours may have your court identifier in the beginning, so it'll be a little different. Next is gonna be the received column. That's gonna tell you how much was actually received, applied, and this is what I meant when we apply that cash bail or the bail to fines and fees. And if that happens, then that amount, whatever was applied, will show up in this column here. Checks paid will populate once we actually make that refund and show how much of that money was actually paid towards a check. And then lastly, we have this balance column here. That lets you know how much balance you have sitting in the holding account for this specific case. So what we want to do at this point is now that we know that we have $500 sitting in the balance, we're going to go ahead and say that this case was dismissed and the judge is now ordering for the money sitting in the holding account to be refunded back to the defendant. Okay, so easy. All we have to do at this point is the same way that we assign those costs, we're going to throw in the form of a docket, we're going to use a docket to refund this money. So I'm going to go ahead and close once on this, and we're going to head over to docket entries. Okay. Now what we want to do is throw another docket to initiate our refund process. To do that, we throw a docket. We're going to go ahead and do add record. And what this one is called is actually cash bail refund. So CBR. Once I hit tab off on this, you'll see some fields populate down here that we will have to enter in. So tab, and there we go. On behalf of is going to let you select the party that has some money tied to that person for the holding account. So I'm going to go ahead and hit this little gray box here. And what we're going to go ahead and do and see is that we have both of our parties listed in this case. And to the right of each of these parties, it's going to tell you how much they have sitting in the holding account for that party. So below, you'll see that there is a $500 account balance for test, and that's correct because when we received that money was on behalf of test, our defendant. So I'm going to go ahead and select test. And to the right, then you'll see that amount get populated. You do not have to do the entire amount. If for some reason the judge would like to, let's say the person was found guilty of speeding and the judge wanted 120 of this to be paid towards fines and fees, then for here, you simply could just change this amount to 380, refund the defendant 380, and then use 120 to pay off fines and fees. For this example, we're going to go ahead and say that everything was dismissed and we just need to refund the defendant all their money. So now we have the 500, that is correct. The last thing that we have to do is include a payee name. Typically this will be the defendant. I would double check with your judge or your court administrator and verify who the payee should be if someone paid differently, if the person was different than the defendant. So for this one, we are going to go ahead and say that it was the defendant who paid. So we're going to hit the little gray box next to the payee name. On this screen, the check payee selection screen, you can choose to search for a payee that may already exist in the system. Most times we're just going to create a new payee, and that's what we're going to do in this situation here. So on the left, I'm going to go ahead and hit add record. This is also a little tip right here to save you having to type a little bit more or re-entering information from the defendant. If the payee for this check is already on the case, say the defendant, then all you have to do is once you're in this check payee maintenance screen, and again, that was just going into the add record, and then over here, hitting the gray box next to payee name. What the system will now do is it will list all the parties on the case. And since we know that this money is actually going to test, we can select test and then hit select. It's going to take all that information and place it into the check payee maintenance screen. So at this point, all we have to do is just hit save. All right, we have our payee, we know who it's on behalf of, and the amount owed. The only thing that's left to do now is just to simply hit test unless you want to add in some comments in the description text box. Once you hit save, the system will then pull that money that is sitting in the holding account with respect to this case and generate a check details. We still have one more step before we actually get the physical check. So you can go ahead and hit save on this, and there we go. So let's go ahead and take a look at the cost screen and see what happened once we threw this cash bail refund docket. So I'm going to hit close and then go over to costs. And down below here, you will now see that received is still 500. We have not applied any of that money. Checks paid 500 because we generated a check in the amount of $500. And now we see that our amount balance is 0. We have no more balance sitting in the holding account with respect to this case. To the very right of that, now we're going to see that there is a refund payment waiting to be processed for $500. The next place that I want to show you guys is Dynalink number 4, which is view checks. This is going to show us all the checks that have been generated out of this case. So we're going to go ahead and view checks. What we're going to see now is this is our check detail. It has not been printed yet. It's still sitting in the system waiting to be printed. We have to assign a few more things to it before we get that physical check. To the left, we see that there's a create dated and printed date. Currently, we only have the 1/8/20. That's letting us know that that's when this check detail was created. Once we print out that check, we will see another date below there. But for now, it is just blank. We'll only see the created date. To the right of that, we have the payee name, which for this one is going to be test. Description is going to show the case number and where it was pulled from. So it was based off of a cash bail refund docket. And then to the right of that, it's showing us which account had the money in there. We had our BH, which stands for bail holding, and then our court identifier 1A. Again, this is where the money was, where the check detail pulled the money from. And then to the very right of that, and the last one is going to be how much that check detail was for in the amount of $500. Here you're going to see that check number. It's currently blank, and the reason for that is because we don't have a check number assigned to it. Again, every check is going to have a check number. This one is no different. And so until we actually print out a check for this check detail, we won't have that check number. So with that being said, let's go ahead and start printing out this check. Where do we do that? We actually are going to get out of case management, and we're going to go ahead and head into financial management. So I'm going to exit out of all of these screens. We got our courthouse in the background. So at the top left-hand corner, we're going to go to modules, financial management, functions, print checks. This is going to bring us to the check creation screen. The only thing that you have to do at this point is hit the little gray box for your bank account. Some courts may have two of them, so I would verify with the judge or the court administrator to see which account you should be selecting this from, just because some checks get generated from different accounts. Some courts just have the single account, so by hitting the gray box, it'll just pull in your single bank account. And that's what we're seeing here. Okay, down here, what we see is that it gives us a little checkbox of whether to include this check detail on the print job or not. I'm gonna go ahead and select that checkbox because we do want to print out this check detail. Then it lists our payee name, the description, which is going to show the case number where this check detail originated from, possible, which is $500, and the amount $500. This possible is showing us how much can actually be generated off this check detail, and the amount is showing us how much this check detail is actually going to be printed for currently. That's a little confusing. Sometimes these amounts are not going to be the same. There are times where the system will group together same payees with check details into one check detail. It does that so that the system isn't trying to print out multiple checks for a single payee. It'll just group up all that money together and print a single check. Let's see how that looks. I went ahead and created a second test case. And what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go ahead and do $250 with the cash bill posted. We're going to refund that immediately and see how that looks. And again, both of these cases have the same payee. And that is very important to remember, is that the system will group check details with the same payee. So let's go ahead and exit out of this one. I'm going to hit yes. Do you make changes? I can hit OK. Exit out of financial management. And I'm going to go a little bit faster just because I already explained this one. So this one's just going to move just a bit faster, okay? So we're going to go modules, case management, go up to functions, case initiation. We're going to put in our other test case, which is actually 20. I'm going to search for it. We're going to open it, head over to docket entries. There's no dockets on there. So I'm going to go do add record, CBP, and then do it for 250. Save, close. I'm not going to check the cost screen because I already know it's all there. I'm going to hit close, print the receipt for 250. Save that. I'm not going to print out the receipts. Okay, so now the last thing that we have to do is go back to docket entries and throw our cash bill refund docket. So I'm going to go ahead and select the defendant here. They have 250. Payee, remember that this is the little trick that I wanted to show you guys. You hit the little gray box for payee, and since this payee is already on the case, you can just go add record. Go to the gray box for payee name, select the defendant. It'll carry that information over to the previous screen. Hit save. It's all there. We got it for 250. Hit save. Okay. So now we have two check details waiting to be printed for the same payee. Let's go ahead and head back into financial management and take a look how that looks in the system. So I'm going to exit out of all these screens. Modules, financial management. We're going to go up to functions and then print checks and choose our bank account. Okay, so you may have already seen down there that the difference is going to be, it still has this include, it still has the payee name, but now the description shows multiple. This is letting you know that there are multiple cases being tied to a single check detail. On the right-hand side, now you see that there's a possible for 750, where one of them was 250, the other one was 500. And then to the right of that, we have an amount for 750. Both of these amounts are the same. Okay, how do we view the individual check details for this one record. If you highlight the case and then go to the left on open, it will give us the check detail screen. This is now going to give us each of the check details individually. So what happens is that if we were to uncheck one of these records, it would be excluded from the check amount. And that's reflective over here in this top right corner as well. This possible is letting you know that there is a possible $750 that can be printed between these two check details. By including only one of these check details, this amount will change. So that's letting you know that that check amount, if printed the way this is currently set up, will print out for $500. So I'm going to go ahead and leave this top one for 500 checked while the 250 unchecked. I'm going to go ahead and hit save and see how that looks on the previous screen. So now you see the same thing. We saw that amount go from 750 to 500. And that would be the same thing if we were to uncheck the $500 check detail and check the 250, this amount would just then be 250. So let's go ahead and say that we want to go ahead and just print out both of these check details. So we're going to go ahead and highlight the check detail there, open, check it to include it, and hit save. Okay, so now it's letting us know that this check total, if we were to print it out right now, it would be for $750. So let's go ahead and print that out. The first thing that you have to do before you can print that out is actually just include a check number up top here. So we're just going to go ahead and put in some number, 3145, perfect. Once you enter in a check number and you have the correct check details included, the only thing that's left to do is hit save. Once you hit save, the system will then print the check. It'll give you a print dialog box, and before you even hit save, I would recommend that if you do print physical checks at your court, to make sure that the checks are loaded into the printer beforehand, because nothing would be worse than having to reprint this check because we printed it out on a piece of paper. Also, if your check does not print them and then they print them out just on normal pieces of paper, then just go ahead and print that on out. So we're going to go ahead and hit save. This is going to give us our first dialog box. I'm going to print all of these to PDF just so you guys can see what they look like. So I'm going to go ahead and print the first one. And then this one's going to be the check listing. So the first print dialog box is going to be for the actual check. The second print dialog box is going to be for the check details. So I'm going to go ahead and put test check, and I'm just going to list it as like real. Save that. Then this is going to be our check listing, print. And that's going to give us our next one. So I'm going to go test, check, listing, save. Okay, so now it's printed everything to PDF. I'm going to go ahead and go back to my desktop. So I'm going to minimize that and then so give that a second here. I'm opening up both of them right now so that they are included in one session. Okay, so here we have the first print dialog box, and as you can tell, it already does look like a check. It has the payee here, the address, void after 90 days, the amount 750 and 0 cents, and the amount. Down here, it's going to check formats. There's a bunch of them in CourtView. Some courts can change them up, but for the most part, they already have them all configured. So the way that you print out a check may be different from what you're seeing in this example here. So it lists both of the check details. It says what cases they came from and which amounts. And then on the check listing, this next tab here, which was the second print dialog box, it's letting you know a little more specific information. It's letting you know the case numbers, which accounts they came from, and then the amounts. So these are very important to have. So I would always suggest printing those out and keeping them on the side for your guys' records. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and minimize that and go back into the system. All right, so that concludes how to generate a check from a refund. We saw that we needed to throw some cost docket that is tied to a holding account. And in this example, we used the cash bail posted docket. We receipted to it. And then once we had an amount of balance available for us in the holding account for that case, we were then able to throw the cash bail refund docket. So the next thing that we want to go ahead and do is we want to go ahead and see how do we look for these checks. What if you want to print out a check or void something out because the defendant didn't receive it, or it's a different address or a different payee that we have to include. So we're going to go ahead and stay in this financial management module. And what we're actually going to go back to is go back up to functions and go right below check print checks, which is check processing. This is going to give us our check selection screen, and this is going to give us the opportunity to start searching for checks, printed checks already. So what you need to do here for the search criteria is you need to put in your bank account from which that check came from. So for this one, we only have the one bank account, so it's going to automatically populate. You can choose to include the payee name if you'd like. You can also choose to include the check status. You can also then choose when this check was actually printed, so the begin and end date. I know that it was today for the 8th. Okay, there we go. We're actually going to get a few checks that come back, so let's go ahead and try that. So hit search. We have a few checks that are actually printed out. So this one right here was the one that we saw just now, 3141. So that's showing you it's going to show us the check number. It's going to show us the payee name on that check. The check status of it, printed lets us know that it was printed. If you were to hit down this drop-down menu, it would give you different options, reconciled and voided. Once a court gets its physical bank statement, it can then reconcile its physical bank statement to CourtView. And once that bank statement does show that it has been cleared out of the bank, we can then reconcile this check. Please bear in mind that once you change it to reconcile and hit save up here, there is no way of changing that back over to a printed status. So always verify that if you're going to change it to reconcile, that it has cleared from the bank account first. Next to that, you can go ahead and include a reconcile date if you were to change that to reconcile. Void reason, if you need to void out this check for whatever reason, and then it's letting us know the check amount. Okay, so what if we wanted to go ahead and, let's say, reprint this check because we forgot to include we didn't load the check into the printer before we printed it. Up here, it does give you the option of reprinting that check. Please bear in mind that it will only print out the check. It will not print out the check listing. This is important. Courts like to have this so that they know more information regarding that check. So what happens if you actually want to keep this check listing as well? I'll go ahead and minimize this. You would actually have to void out this check completely by going to this check status and doing voided and then hitting a save. We're going to go ahead and do that and see what happens to these cases. So I'm going to go ahead and void out this check. Let's say that it was an incorrect check number. Let's say that the check was supposed to be 3140, let's say 3150, okay, or 3154. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over this check from the printed status to voided. Again, we are doing this because we want to void out the check because we printed it out incorrectly. Once you change over that status, you can then hit save. This dialog box is going to come up saying should the checks be reprinted, escheated, voided. By hitting reprint, it's going to put this check detail back into that print checks queue, just like we saw previously. And it's going to allow us to just put in another check number and print out the check with the check listing as well. Escheating means that it's going to Escheating means when the checks are no longer valid. And so whenever let's say you were sending out a refund to a defendant and they gave you a bad address and you've been trying to reach that person for a couple months now and still no response. That money now the court would choose to then send that money to their county, and that would be escheating it. It will then just put this money, whatever is outstanding or wasn't cashed, into a disbursement account, and at the end of the month, it will be included on your end of month check, and it will be sent to some unclaimed funds account or something like that. Void is going to completely void out this check, and it will put all this money back onto the case. So let's go ahead and take a look at all these examples here. The only one that I'm not going to do is escheat. Sheeting should only be done when that check really needs to be sheeted and then you cannot get a hold of the individual. You're more than welcome to contact the trial court service desk if you have any questions whether a check should be sheeted or not. So we're going to go ahead and do reprint. Okay, it goes out of that screen. Let's go ahead and take a look at that screen one more time. So I'm going to go up to functions and then check processing. I'm going to go ahead and put in the bank account. I'm going to go ahead and put in the begin date. And hit search. It's going to come up with all of our checks. And now it has a voided status. Okay. You can choose to put a voided reason right there. I'm just going to leave that as user error. An additional search criteria that you can choose on the screen is actually looking for this specific check number. So let's go ahead and say that we're going to remove this date right here. And let's say that we do just know the check number that was printed. In order, these fields right here by default, I'm actually hitting the keys here. You cannot enter anything in. In order to make those active, you need to switch over from all to checks only. That will then make these active and you can just choose 3145. I would suggest putting that 3145 in both the begin and end dates because there is a possibility that if you just put a beginning, the system will try to pull all the checks that start with 3145 and it could have a potential to lock up the system. So again, if you have one specific check, put that 3145 or the check number into both the begin and ending fields and then hit search. I'm going to go ahead and switch that over real quick. We're just going to hit save. That's fine. So there we go, 3145. So then it'll only bring up the check that we just have. Now at this point, I'm going to go ahead and put user error and then hit save. So once more, you can choose to search for a check based on payee name, the check status, the begin and end date of when that check was actually printed out of the system. And then by checking the checks only, you can choose to search for just the check number. Okay, so we had just reprinted that check. So we're gonna go back up to, and I mentioned that when you reprint a check, it's gonna put it back into the print checks queue. So we're gonna go up to functions because we're still in financial management, and we're gonna go to print checks. We're gonna choose our bank account, and there we go. See, now we have that same check detail, and we can just choose to put in our new check number, which is 3154, because we said that we transposed those two last numbers, and we're gonna go ahead and hit save on this. We already saw what these print dialog boxes do, so I'm gonna go ahead and hit cancel on them. Okay. So there we go. We're going to go up to functions, check processing. I'm going to go ahead and search for that check now and go bank account. And then I'm going to do checks only, 3154, hit search. See, I accidentally did not put in that end check and it pulls in a bunch of other checks as well. So always be sure to put in 31, your check number to the begin and ends. There we go. So now we got our check number. Let's go ahead and take a look what happens once we try to void it out for another reason. So we're going to go ahead and do voided once more for the check status and hit save. It's going to give us that dialog box one more time asking us if this was reprinted, sheeted, or voided. Let's say that this money was not supposed to even be refunded, that there was some issue that happened with the case and that money needs to be put back onto it. The money needs to be put back onto the case. You can choose to completely void out this check, and by doing void, it's going to put that money back onto the case. So before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and hit cancel. I'm going to go into the case, into the first case, and just show how that looks currently. So I'm going to go to modules, case management, functions, case initiation. I'm going to go ahead and put in our first case. Open that up, go to costs, and as you can see here, there's still a zero balance, right? So what happens when we try to void out that check completely? We're gonna go ahead and hit exit, 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 exit. We're back at our check selection screen, which we use to search for this check. I'm gonna go ahead and hit void, and I'm gonna go ahead and hit save. This time I'm actually going to go ahead and do a void. There we go. Okay, so now I'm going to exit out of this completely. I'm going to go ahead and do modules, case management, because I want to search for that case one more time, functions, case initiation. Go put in our case number, search, open, head over to costs. And as you can see, we now have $500 sitting in that balance. So now we have that money sitting back in the holding account for this case. If we were to look at that other 20 CR20 case, a 250 balance would end up on that one as well. So at this point, if we were to have to create another check, we would have to throw another refund docket. So let's go to the left and take a look at this view checks now. We saw before that the checks, there's multiple checks now because one of them was going to be voided. Two of them were voided, and then we reprinted one. So we had our first original 3145, which is this one here. We didn't see a printed date, but now we do see one. We then voided out that 3145, which is showing up here, which has a little small negative amount. We then created another one because we transposed the numbers. That gave it a check number 3154 for 500, and then we just voided that one back out with this record here. We're going to go ahead and hit close, and I'm going to go ahead and close out of all of this. So once again, I want to go over what we just discussed. We went ahead and discussed how to receipt money to the holding account in the form of a cash bail posted. We then refunded that money using the cash bail refund docket. Then we were able to create that check detail. That check detail, we were able to print that out using the print checks. We saw what it looks like when the system tries to group up similar payees when they have check details sitting in there. And then lastly, we looked on the check processing screen, which shows us how to search for the reconcile and void out these checks just in case we need to reprint them out. Thank you guys for watching. You guys have just watched the checks portion of the CoreView Finance training videos. If you guys have any questions of anything covered here, please don't hesitate to call us at the Trial Court Service Desk. Thank you.